Hey there. I'll be going over a run of Noita I did recently that went pretty far compared to some of my other attempts. I've only been playing the game for around 10 hours, so it's not exactly an expert run, and, there are some mistakes here and there, but sometimes that's more interesting anyway. I'm starting out with Spitter Bolt, bombs, and an Excel potion. Realistically, I'd probably prefer to have water just for dealing with stains and such, but an Excel potion comes in handy sometimes. After cleaning up some minor enemies and doing a bit of exploring, I accidentally dug myself into some sludge, and thankfully I'm able to find water reasonably quickly to deal with that, and then mix them into my potions so that I don't need to go find more later. I managed to find a chest out in the open, which is pretty nice, and then I encountered one of those fire enemies that most people would not want to deal with, realistically. I do thankfully have some water now, so I managed to kill it by just pouring some on it from the distance. Unfortunately, I encounter another of them, and while I do try to use water again, I run out, and then I need to go back and actually get some from where the portal was, and he jumps me and reduces my health to the point where I pretty much have to run away, or I'm likely going to die to a random shot from him. Since I lucked out with that chest, I was able to afford a pretty nice shotgun-esque wand. And perk-wise, I end up picking Explosive Immunity, since realistically that will help me in a lot of situations. Potentially, at least. Explosions are pretty common. The Coal Pits ends up being fairly uneventful, to be honest. There's only a few things that really happened here. For one, I find an enemy with a wand that has some trigger spark bolts on it. I have a free slot, so I just take it anyway. There's also an alchemist here, which honestly I haven't really seen these guys too much. They're pretty tanky, and I didn't really want to get too close to it, despite my obvious advantage at that range. And I can't exactly say why, but there's a sizable blood lake by the portal here, so I pretty much had to swim down in order to even get to it in the first place. This time I wouldn't say I really got that much gold, so I decided to get a 5 spell shot wand, which should work for a good amount of configurations. Perk-wise, I get Hungry Ghost, and I actually don't even know if this is that good of a perk. I just thought it would be worth trying out at least. It ends up being kind of useful, but not overly. I arrive at the snowy depths and immediately find another one that has glitter bombs on it, so I replace the fourth one, which wasn't really doing much for me anyway. I find another one later that's pretty much another shotgun, but with short-ranged homing and spitter bolts, so I decided to replace my first starting one with it because it was just a spitter bolt one anyway. It kills the enemies in this area pretty easily, to be honest, so it ended up being fairly fundamental to this run. But I did lose access to my initial bombs because I swapped them out, so I started using the glitter ones instead for minor destruction. This enemy I was dealing with was honestly kind of being a pain, so I decided to just leave early. Reason being that I wanted to do some tinkering, and I figured these shotguns would be pretty good for a section coming up that is pretty close quarters. Of course, because I decided to leave early, I don't actually have enough gold to buy anything, so I skip over the spells and just go for the perk. In this case, I decided to go for extra perk because I actually kind of bet that I was going to be able to get through the base this time. I arrive at the base, and realistically my wands end up working exactly how I thought they would. Very well. I find a concentrated mana potion, as well as a new wand that actually doesn't seem to do much, fortunately. I end up having to grind through a decent amount of enemies, but I do find an invisibility potion as well. Along with another new wand that, it's a bit of a problematic one, but it does and doesn't help this run. You'll see. You can immediately tell just because when I try actually firing the thing, I end up taking a bunch of damage from the structures collapsing around me. Not really a great decision on my part. After taking it slow for a while due to the previous error, I did end up finding a one that has propane tanks on it, but I skipped it, and I would say that was actually a mistake as well. Due to checking the wiki a bit, I actually did learn that you can melt steel with concentrated mana, so I decided to use the potion to get rid of some of the steel in the area and kinda dig through a bit. Luckily, the portal is right there below what I was digging through, and I go through immediately. I tinker with that sphere wand a bit, and then get the close call perk, which increases my crit chance if I'm close to an enemy, which is pretty darn good for a shotgun. Admittedly, I've only been in this jungle once, so I don't actually know that much about it. I immediately get raided by some enemies trying to get me right when I try to drop down, but I can take them out pretty easily at this point. I try using the sphere wand again, and it actually blocks an enemy out from being able to do anything to me, so I can kind of avoid them for the moment. I'm gonna be real with you though, the spiders in this game kinda creep me out with how their legs move and such. It's actually fairly, well, realistic-esque, I suppose, but that doesn't make it something I'm into. After dueling with said spider though, I was pretty low on health, so I really wanted to get to the exit as soon as possible. This is when I started to actually use the invisibility potion to get past a fair amount of enemies in this area, because honestly there were clusters of them and I probably would have died if I actually tried to fight them conventionally. For some reason or another, there's a lot of acid coming from down below, and I kinda try to back up, but the plant is blocking me from doing so. I use the sphere wand again, and I do take a bit of damage, but at least I'm able to get out of there. I managed to get to the portal after using more invisibility potion to deal with the rest of the enemies that I can see. I don't know why, but when I get to the portal, the statue on the left is glitching out like crazy, and I don't know if it's because of an effect in the environment or it's just some random thing that happened. Out of the selection of spells here, I end up being able to buy Magic Bolt, which I slap onto my third wand for a bit more power. And despite my grievances regarding the spider legs, I do end up getting a spider minion, and I would say that it's actually better than I expected it to be. I've straight up never been to this area, so I don't actually even know what to expect here. First thing to deal with is a lightning guy, and my spider minion immediately makes themselves useful and actually does a decent amount of damage. Then there's a skeleton shooting fireballs, kind of like that fire guy from way back when. The Hungry Ghost stops some of the fireball explosions, which let me close in on him a bit easier, and I wasn't exactly expecting the skull to just stay there because I didn't immediately see it, and I did take some damage, unfortunately. Given the amount of explosives around here, I can pretty much freely set them off and not care too much, but sometimes they do contain materials that will kill you anyway, like frozen vapor, so I still need to be somewhat careful. Turns out another advantage of the spider is being able to get free damage on shielded enemies, though to be honest I was able to deal with them okay myself too. At this point I started realizing that the spears weren't really that good at digging, they were good at collapsing things, but if there was a big pile then I couldn't really get through it most of the time, especially since enemies kept trying to interrupt me anyway. Thankfully the portal was actually not that hard to get to, I just had to go to the left a bit. The ones are really expensive here, which isn't exactly surprising, but yeah, I'm not going to be able to actually get any more ones for the rest of the run at this point. Perk-wise, I decided to double down on the creepy legs for some reason and just become a spider myself, with a fairly cool perk that has some interesting movement. The spider legs immediately come into play because pretty much every enemy at the top part of this area just decides to fly up and cause problems for me immediately. Meanwhile, I was kind of wondering where my spider minion went, and apparently they were trying to attack an enemy they could literally not even damage, and neither could I, and I actually don't even know what's up with that enemy at all. I'd have to look it up later. After looking around for a bit, I decide to dig down, which mostly works, but a dark crystal shows up and kills me, which unfortunately... Thanks for watching.